Dinosaurs are incredibly powerful and dangerous animals. So let's talk about some of the most dangerous. This is the polar bear lizard, better known as Nonuxoris, and they happen to be my favorite tyrannosaur. You may have been introduced to them recently in the final episode of Prehistoric Planet, in which a pack of them brought down a Pachyrhinosaurus, which would have been some of the most common prey in its territory. Traditionally, these guys were once seen as a dwarf tyrannosaur, but there's a possibility that the holotype is actually a juvenile. If those new estimates are correct, they could get up to 30 feet long, though it should be noted that other estimates put these guys at only about 20 feet in length. No matter which size estimate is accurate, these guys were still the apex predators of their polar homes. They outsized all of their competition. And if they did indeed hunt in packs, that would make them that much more lethal. Oh, and if I didn't mention before, they lived in what is modern-day Alaska. But during their time, Alaska was much farther north, which means these dinosaurs were adapted to live in the coldest regions of their time. Much like another relative, the Eutyrannus, they likely had an abundant coating of feathers, which would serve to protect them from the cold. These amazing dinosaurs have shown us that even tyrannosaurs could live in the polar region, and solidifies just how adaptable dinosaurs really are. This last picture is purely for all of our enjoyment. Tyrannosaurs are some of the most elite predators. After all, a name like Dreadful Lizard doesn't come out of nowhere. Allow me to introduce you to Gorgosaurus. Now, they didn't grow as large as some of their later relatives, but they could still reach up to 30 feet in length, and they could weigh upwards of 2 tons. These guys are part of the Albertosaurine Tyrannosaurs, and much like Albertosaurus, they had a large crest above their eyes. But even they had their struggles. Think about it for a second. What would be the biggest threat to a large Tyrannosaur? You guessed it, another Tyrannosaur. Gorgosaurus shared its territory with a larger and more robust Tyrannosaur, Daspletosaurus. But like many modern animals, they may have solved it by niche partitioning. Gorgosaurus was more gracile and light-built than their counterpart, which may have made them better suited to hunting hadrosaurs, leaving the more robust Daspletosaurus to hunt the ceratopsians. That being said, prey is not typically exclusive. Any good predator would take an opportunity when it arises. Despite their smaller size, Gorgosaurus was more widespread. We have dozens of fossils of these guys, all the way from juveniles to adults. Some folks, including myself and maybe this gentleman, would call this a gorgeous saurus. The first dinosaur we ever named was a carnivore, Megalosaurus. And I just gotta say real quick, this photo is unsettling. These guys are from the Jurassic and they lived in what is modern-day Europe. Now, they weren't the largest carnivores. They reached a little over 20 feet and were about a ton, but they didn't need to be massive like some of their later counterparts. Back then, where these guys lived, nothing had really evolved to quite that size yet, so it was pretty easy for them to take the title of apex predator. They actually used to be classified as a wastebasket taxon, but in the last 20 years it seems to have been mostly resolved. Megalosaurus was a fairly stout theropod. It would have needed that strength to hunt the primitive sauropods that were around, but like most carnivorous dinosaurs, they're mostly about that bite. They had a number of fairly large blade-like teeth, and would have used them quite effectively. There's still much about them that we don't know. But since its original naming in the 1800s, we've come a long way, and hopefully we'll keep going even further. Are you afraid of raptors? Well, you should be. This is a Dakotaraptor. These enormous raptors could grow upwards of 15 feet. Some of the larger estimates even upwards of 18 feet. Like all raptors, they came equipped with a deadly sickle claw. They used those massive 9-inch claws to hook into their prey. They'd use their arms to keep themselves stable while they dealt damage with their claws and jaws. And Dakotaraptor were pursuit predators. Compared to other large dromaeosaurs like Utahraptor, Dakotaraptor is much more lightly built. Their leg bones would have been thinner than Utahraptors. So these guys are rather chasing you down rather than waiting for you. And honestly, I'm not sure which is more terrifying. Remember that one quote Dr. Grant makes about the raptors?
The point is, you are alive when they start to eat you.
Raptors' method of hunting, the RPR, that quote rings true. Much like modern birds of prey, they would probably start eating the animal before it died. These are brilliant and powerful animals. There's just something about a raptor that's this size that's also incredibly fast that doesn't sit right with me. Jurassic Park raptors are definitely somewhat scary, but they got nothing on Dakotaraptor. This is the Lord of the Lizard Eaters, and if you were a dinosaur in the Jurassic, they were basically your final boss fight. Their name is Sorophaganax. Some scientists consider them a large species of Allosaurus, but others believe it to be its own separate species. Whether or not they were an Allosaurus, they were still one of the largest members of their family. Even the smaller size estimates put this beast around 35 feet in length. The largest estimates is up to 40 feet plus. If the upper estimates are accurate, they would be on par with the Tyrannosaurus for length, though not quite as heavy. They would have been the biggest predators around, larger even than Torvosaurus. Whether they're their own species or just a relative, they share a lot of features with Allosaurus. They probably use similar feeding strategies to Allosaurus as well. Allosaurs would use their limbs to pin animals down. Because they had relatively weak jaws in comparison to other theropods, this would make it easier for them to kill prey, very similar to how modern birds of prey eat today. These 5-ton terrors are also the state fossil of Oklahoma, but they are quite rare to find. Now, they may not be as famous as their cousin the Allosaurus or even the giant Tyrannosaurus, but they are complete legends in their own right. These dinosaurs ruled Madagascar long before King Julian even thought about it. They're called Majungasaurus, and they're not your average carnivore. At up to 20 feet in length, they're considered medium-sized carnivores, but they were by far the largest in prehistoric Madagascar. They had some pretty amazing traits that helped solidify their role as the apex. You see, abelisaurs lacked the extremely powerful bite found in some theropods. Instead, their jaws were shorter and their neck was much more powerful. Those features were even more prominent in Majungasaurus. They had a much broader snout and their nasal bones were fused together for strength. The teeth in the front of the jaw were also more robust and served as an anchor point for their bite. Because they were so robust, they would have better resisted torsion unlike other theropods. It's thought that these may have been adaptations to hunting sauropods, but sauropods weren't the only thing on the menu for these guys. Majungasaurus is one of the only dinosaurs in which we have direct evidence for cannibalism. How or why, we're not entirely sure. Most scientists believe it was more or less similar to Komodo dragons, who will often kill and eat each other when fighting over carcasses. The moral of the story? King Julian should be happy he didn't have to fight this for his crown. This is the shark-toothed lizard, better known as Carcharodontosaurus. Probably heard of their more famous cousins, the Giganotosaurus, but they're more than fearsome in their own right. Most current estimates put these guys at over 40 feet in length, and the teeth which give them their names are up to 8 inches. These guys used to live in what is modern-day Africa, where in some places they would share territory with Spinosaurus. However, both dinosaurs have very specific niches, so they likely wouldn't have competed with each other very much. However, if they did clash, it would be nowhere near a fair fight, because Spinosaurus really isn't built for confrontations against larger dinosaurs. Carcharodontosaurus definitely is. Their large size and sharp teeth would have made them the most powerful predator in their area. Competition for them would have been very low. Before new research was published for Spinosaurus, we used to think that they were the main competition for Carcharodontosaurus. Now know that they were in fact undisputed. Hail to the king, I suppose. This is the flesh crocodile, more commonly known as Sarcosuchus. Their name's a little misleading. You see, they're part of a group known as crocodiliforms, which are related to crocodiles but are not true crocodilians. These guys are up to 30 feet in length. They lived in what is currently Africa and South America, and they ate dinosaurs. In South America might have included dinosaurs like Mapusaurus. In Africa, they had to contend with dinosaurs like Suchomimus, and that bulbous tip on their nose may have helped them stay underwater for longer periods. This part of its snout is called a bulla. It puts even Squidward's nose to shame. It's been compared to the modern ghariales gara. Unlike ghariales, all Sarcosuchus had a bulla, which would give them an edge in ambush hunting. They were once thought to be the largest species of crocodiliforms. Just like all crocodilians, they're an animal to be respected, unless you want an up-close and personal tooth count. A predator so powerful it was nicknamed Genghis Khan. This is Tarbosaurus batar. As I'm sure you've guessed, they're relatives of Tyrannosaurus. At up to 35 feet in length, they're only slightly smaller than a T-Rex, and they possess some pretty unique features that separates them from their American cousins. The most notable is a locking mechanism in the lower jaw. In their upper jaws, their maxilla formed a large backward-facing projection, which made the whole upper jaw more rigid. Some scientists believe that their more rigid skull was an adaptation to hunting sauropods, because their skulls would be better adapted to resisting the tension that comes from hunting such large prey. But that's not the only big difference between them and T-Rex. Their eyesight isn't as well developed as T-Rex, but a large auditory nerve suggested that they had excellent hearing. On top of that, in 1997, a skull was discovered with impressions of a dewlap underneath its neck. This adaptation was most likely for communication and mating purposes. When not in use, it would more than likely look like just a flap of skin underneath their throat, and they could be like frigate birds where only the males have them. But unfortunately, we'll have to find more evidence to back that up for sure. Most everybody loves T-Rex. Tyrannosaurus may be the king, but Tarbosaurus is the Khan. Allow me to introduce Torvosaurus, one of the only predators in the Jurassic capable of competing with Allosaurus. Now, there are some important things to remember about Torvosaurus, starting with the fact that there's two species. You've got the European version on top and the American version on the bottom. The American variant is unlucky because they would have had much more intense competition from Allosaurus, as well as having to deal with Sorophaganax. Regardless, they were still very large carnivores. The bigger of the two species reached up to 33 feet in length, making them one of the largest carnivores of the Jurassic. You know, for some reason I've heard the opinion a lot that they're related to Allosaurus, but just to clarify, these guys aren't that closely related to them at all. These guys are part of a group of dinosaurs known as Megalosaurus. Because of that, as you can see, they're fairly robust. Not quite as stocky and big as a Tyrannosaur, but still fairly rotund. But here's something a little less scary. One of the most monumental finds attributed to Torvosaurus is a clutch of eggs, and that clutch even contains some embryonic material, making it the first known from a large theropod. Gives us a little insight into the parental care of carnivorous dinosaurs. Absolutely magnificent. It's the big, the bad, the Giganotosaurus. It's my birthday, so I thought I'd do my favorite dinosaur. These powerful carnivores were the apex of their territory, and they have various features that I find very interesting. Firstly, let's talk about this massive skull. These skulls could be over 5.5 feet long, and in the rear of the skull they have special adaptations that allow them to open and close their jaws very quickly, delivering quick and powerful bites to their prey, which would have mostly consisted of sauropods. And as I'm sure some of you have noticed, they don't look like the Jurassic World version, because while the Jurassic World design is intriguing, it's not very accurate, especially with that spine. But in reality, they did reach a large size rather quickly. Studies of the oxygen isotopes have shown us that they had a rather high metabolism, similar to that of a 1-ton mammalian carnivore, meaning they could reach their full 40-plus size in a short span of time. As many of you know, there's been a continued size debate between Giganotosaurus and T-Rex. Comparisons with Meraxes gigas may show us the truth, and reveal more about this amazing carnivore.